morning. I'm Savannah Sellers. Joe is off today. Right now on Morning News Now, death toll rising. 4 more victims have been pulled from the rubble in Surfside as rescue officials brace for Tropical Storm Elsa. Plus, new questions arise about the condo's initial collapse. The latest coming up from South Florida. Making landfall. Meanwhile, Elsa has hit Florida, now making its way up the state's Gulf Coast, bringing with it widespread storm surge warnings, blistering winds, and heavy rains. An update from where the storm is making landfall next. Tiny danger, a common household item used to power so many everyday devices, could prove deadly for children. The potentially life-saving trick every parent should know. And descending into chaos, contentious discussions happening at school board meetings across the country as the future of critical race theory and other progressive policies are considered. We'll travel to one county in Northern Virginia where death threats and harassment are now part of the conversation. Let's get started, though, in Surfside. New this morning, rescue workers are racing the clock there, searching through the rubble as Tropical Storm Elsa threatens to bring rain and wind to the region. The mayor of Miami-Dade County now says that 28 people are confirmed dead and 117 remain unaccounted for. NBC News political reporter Vaughn Hilliard joins us now. Vaughn, good morning. So let's talk first about how the demolition of the remaining part of the tower, we just saw that a couple nights ago, how has that impacted the search?
Yeah, good morning, Savannah. Officials say that now they have access to every part of that building that collapsed because the rubble, part of that rubble that they say was initially holding up that existing structure that was still standing before it was demolished there on Sunday night. But now with that building down and with the danger of it looming over, gone, they are now able to wholly access that site. They've had, ever since 1 a.m. yesterday morning, those crews on site working through the rubble. But the difficult reality, too, Savannah, is that just 28 individuals have been recovered over these last 13 days of searching. 117 individuals still remain unaccounted for at this time. I want to let you hear, though, directly from Mayor Cava here from Miami-Dade County here, where she addressed what this last 24 hours of the search effort has looked like. Take a listen.
I'm in awe of the men and women of the USAR task force teams who've been continuing to brave dangerous and changing conditions. For 12 days, fire, smoke, and now wind and torrential rain. They are continuing the mission and the search of the collapse area. They've worked under this great difficulty, and they have pulled shifts to rotate because that's how much they want to be out there searching. The first responders are the most frustrated by any delays we have experienced. Truly, they live to save lives.
Officials say that they've now removed 4.8 million tons of cement of that rubble here so far. But these last 24 hours have been critical as part of the search. And the big question, though, is what is the impact of this incoming storm?
Yeah, Vaughn, so let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, we just heard the mayor there say bracing for torrential rain. How can they prepare for this? How can they continue searching with weather conditions like that? What is their plan?
It's difficult. And the first outer layers of that storm, that approaching storm, it struck about 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon. It had been sunny and humid before that. And then suddenly a cloud of rain, of thunder and lightning, and high winds came in. I think we have video showing the scene of what those workers, what those rescue workers had to go through. And at 2 different points last night, the rescue mission had to come to a temporary halt there because of lightning concerns. The other weather factor that could potentially be an issue here in the next 24, 40 hours ahead is wind. Essentially, they've set a 30-mile-per-hour threshold for which it needs to be under in order to continue their operations. They said rain, though, is not that big of a concern that those rescue operations can continue. The big question is lightning and wind at this point. Right now, Savannah, clearly there's no rain here, but we expect it in the hours ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can just imagine how difficult it is to do a job under conditions like that, never mind even the safety concerns. Vaughn, also, how are local officials assisting families and first responders during this weeks-long rescue mission? I mean, we're hearing these long shifts that these rescue workers are pulling. Obviously, we know how difficult this time is for these families. What kind of assistance are they all getting?
Yeah, and for these families, Savannah, again, 117 individuals still unaccounted for. 28 individuals who have been pronounced deceased. We're talking about homes of family members. We are talking about insurance claims. The officials yesterday were kind of walking through the process in which FEMA is down here working with those families to help file those insurance claims. The big question is, who is going to pay up for the damage, the deaths that were inflicted upon these families? I mean, obviously, money can't begin to make up for the losses that this community has experienced. At the same time, there are family members who have lost their loved ones, who are reliant on those loved ones, and they are here to help them through. And again, there is that part of that condo complex where folks watched their livelihoods, their homes, their prized possessions be demolished. They're lucky to be surviving because they were in the complex that did not initially collapse. At the same time, they watched everything that they owned go down. There was nothing recovered from their apartments before it was demolished. And for those families, they've lost an awful lot.
Oh, they certainly have. Vaughn Hilliard, thank you so much. As the search enters its 13th day, questions remain about how this collapse happened in the first place and if it could have been prevented. Alan Kilsheimer joins us now. He's the president and CEO of KCE Structural Engineers. He investigated the 9/11 attacks, and he's been hired by the town of Surfside to investigate this collapse. Alan, thank you so much for being here. I have so many questions for you, so I'm grateful that you're joining us. So first, let's just start with how this is going to work for you. The scene is still the site of an active search and recovery mission. What's your process for investigating how this collapse might have happened while this search is still going on? And also knowing that this is, of course, a lot different than the other things that we know that you've investigated, like the 9/11 attacks, where what happened was obvious. How do you go about this?
Well, given that we don't want to interfere with the rescue operation, starting on Friday when I got here, we have been looking at all the drawings that we can find at the building department, all the information people are sending us, looking at pretty much everything that we can get our hands on. And we are doing computer models, engineering computer models of the building based on the drawings. And we are looking at videos and photographs. And once we get the computer models done, then we will essentially plug in what we see from the videos and stuff that we've seen so far. When the rescue people are completed with their work, we're going to be going onto site to do materials testing and investigation of the below ground information that's there. And then once the Miami-Dade police are done their investigation of the materials that have been removed from the site, we will be searching through all that material. We'll be taking samples of that material and have it tested for various kinds of things that we're looking at to understand what the materials were. And then you plug all that information back into the computer models to see how that impacts what happened. What we are looking for is a trigger, because all the buildings, we've designed buildings for almost 60 years. When you design a building, there are mistakes. When you make mistakes, there's no way out of that. And when they build a building, they don't build exactly what's on the drawings. So we plug all those things in, but those typically are not the trigger. Those things have been there since the building was built. Something started this. It's like at the Pentagon, the World Trade and stuff like that. We knew what started it there, but we don't know what started it here. So we have a list of about 20 or 30 or 40 things that we think could be triggers. And as we're going along, we're eliminating them or reducing the possibility of them impacting it. And then as we do the materials testing and the computer modeling, we will get it down to some number. I doubt that it'll be a single source, but you never know. We did a small computer model to help the rescue folks with what wind force we thought could bring the building down before, and we shared that with them, and they used that information in what they did. So it's a very long, intricate process. I've said to people before, it's like taking 3 or 4 huge 3,000-piece puzzles, throwing them up in the air, sweeping them around so everything gets mixed up, and then trying to put it back together again.
Yeah, I mean, wow. I mean, when you put it that way, it obviously seems so intricate and difficult. But Alan, I wonder, and I so appreciate you using that term trigger and explaining to me that there's this list of 20 to 30 potential triggers. So as someone who, and for many of our viewers who don't, have a deep understanding of structural engineering or the type of thing that you're looking for, I'm wondering if you can explain a little bit more what a trigger might be, because I think a lot of us have been reading so much about this and seeing this information, seeing these documents that for years there were concerns about the makeup of the building, that just days before this happened, someone was there to look at the pool and took pictures of deteriorating concrete. And as somebody, again, with not a deep understanding of structural engineering, you hear that the base of the building where the pool is had deteriorating concrete, and you're kind of like, well, that does seem like a major concern. Is that type of thing a trigger? And when you have something like that, when you have information like that, I'm sure these are the pictures and documents that you've, of course, taken a look at. Is there going to be more of a smoking gun than something like that here?
I don't believe, for instance, the deterioration of the pool that I saw, because I remember there's another building here, the north building, that is similar to this building. So I'm able to go into the north building and see similar things that have not fallen down and in not terrible condition. But that pool photograph is far distant and had nothing to do with the collapse of this building. I am sure of that. The issue is, the trigger is, I guess the best way to put it is if I'm standing up and I'm kind of teeter-tottering around because I'm old and feeble, I didn't fall down. But if somebody pulls a rug out from underneath me, then I'm going to fall down, right? I wasn't falling down before, but then somebody pulled the rug, and that's the trigger, essentially, that made me fall down. That's the best way to describe it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Alan, that's so helpful in understanding as we all wonder how something like this could have happened and what we are going to find here. So thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time to join us.
Great. Thank you.
As we mentioned earlier, Tropical Storm Elsa is barreling toward the west coast of Florida after claiming 3 lives in the Caribbean. The National Weather Service warns people should prepare for massive amounts of rain as well as possible tornadoes. Georgia and South Carolina are now under tropical storm watches. A storm surge warning is in effect for most of the western coast of the peninsula. Tampa Bay sits squarely in the middle of Elsa's path, and residents there are beefing up storm preps, remaining optimistic but still being careful.
Whether this one is or not, there's going to be one. We're due for another one. So I lived through Andrew down in Fort Lauderdale. Don't want to go through that again.
NBC News correspondent Sam Brock is in Key West, Florida, where conditions deteriorated overnight. Sam, it does not look great there right now. Tell us, how's it been going for you, and how prepared is Key West for Tropical Storm Elsa? Are people worried about this?
Savannah, good morning. I don't think there's a high level of concern simply because they've gone through this so many times, but we're getting hit pretty good right now. Wind speeds are sustained between 25 and 30 miles an hour, but Savannah, overnight, there was a 62-mile-an-hour wind gust in Key West, so certainly the potential is there. As you look around me right now, the Florida Straits, and this is south over my shoulder, are starting to kick up. We're seeing some pretty good surf coming over the wall here. The storm surge is expected to be between 1 and 2 feet. We're expecting 2 to 4 inches of rain. The port closed down temporarily. All flights, Savannah, as you would imagine, on and off of this key are gone and canceled right now, at least through 10 o'clock this morning. You drive through downtown Straits, it's kind of eerie because this is such a lively place in general. Yeah. But right now, it is all closed. A little bit of modest flooding that is expected. There were no mandatory evacuation orders, Savannah, but many people were encouraged, if they're close to the water, certainly on their boat or living in an RV or mobile home, to move inland. But right now, the real question is, how much strength is Elsa really going to be picking up as it hits the open water? It's past Cuba now and comes toward Florida.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about as it moves its way up specifically to Tampa Bay. What's the Gulf Coast doing to prepare?
So we're talking about people being advised to have at least 7 days of food and non-perishables, water supplies, to make sure that they have an emergency kit ready. I mean, realistically, we're looking at a storm surge warning, Savannah, that stretches just south of Fort Myers and Naples, all the way up and kind of curling around the Big Bend area of Florida. That's north of Tampa, and then going out a little bit into the Panhandle as well. What they're looking at is a storm surge there as much as 3 to 5 feet. And let's be clear that when we talk about storm surge, it can be life-threatening inundation. So even in a normal tropical storm, or perhaps a Category 1 storm, which is really the big news today, Savannah, that as it approaches north of Tampa, Elsa has a projected intensity of 70 miles an hour of sustained winds. Once you get to 75, that's when you're in Category 1 status. We're watching that very closely.
Yeah, Sam, and I know something else that you're watching is this storm surge, and that Tampa Bay is particularly vulnerable to that. Tell us why. What's going on in Tampa?
That is true. It's one of the most vulnerable places in the world, and I'm told from the weather experts, it's because of the continental shelf. The way that it's shaped, it's kind of a low gradient, so instead of the water just falling right off, it sits there and pools. They call that bathymetry, and that function makes it more dangerous for people in that area. They have not gotten hit with a major storm in a number of years, but even a Category 1 does pose a risk right now to the Tampa area. So all eyes right now just north of Tampa today.
Absolutely. All right, Sam Brock, those waves do look pretty big behind you. Please stay safe, and thank you for your reporting. Let's get the latest on where Tropical Storm Elsa is right now and what's to come. Bill Cairns, hi, good morning.
Hey, good morning. So we never give up on these storms, especially when they're over the warm waters in the Gulf of Mexico. But this one looks to be in the minor to moderate impact category. You know, I keep going like minor, moderate, high, and then like historical. This would be in most instances a minor storm. If it does get up to maybe a Category 1 hurricane, maybe we'd bump that up to the moderate. It's a small storm, so that helps. You can see where the storm is located. It's not that far away from Key West, only 50 miles away, and the winds are around 40 miles per hour. So that's very doable. By Florida standards, you can handle that. No damage expected at all. And you notice that as far as Surfside goes in the Miami area, winds are only 8 to 15 miles per hour this morning. And this is about as close as the storm is going to get. So that's good news there. They still could get some squalls going through during the day today, but that's about the worst of it. So here's the latest from the National Hurricane Center. 60 mile per hour winds moving north-northwest at about 12. And that big rain shield will slowly be heading northwards during the day today. So it's going to be one of those, soggy travel days, Fort Myers to Naples, and gradually the winds will increase. But again, this is not a big, huge storm. So the highest winds will mostly be offshore, and then maybe later tonight towards Pinellas County, Clearwater Beach area could get some pretty high gusts, especially if it does bump up to 70 or maybe even a Category 1 hurricane. Landfall expected either late tonight or early tomorrow morning, heading up towards Cedar Key, and then the storm will race up the coast. So as far as the biggest concern for me, it's going to be storm surge warning. All those little back bays there, all the water is going to pile up when the south wind moves in, when the storm's closest to you. Fort Myers, Port Charlotte, Sarasota, the Tampa, Hernando Beach, and Cedar Key. So that's that 3 to 5 feet. If it happens at high tide, we'd add another foot to that. So that's why we could have some problems with some water there. As far as peak wind gusts go, though, Savannah, I really don't have much concerns. I don't think we're going to see hardly any wind damage with this storm. The only exception would be if we get any tornadoes. We can get sometimes tornadoes with these landfalling storms, so that would be a different concern later this afternoon.
All right, Bill, thank you so much, and I know we'll be back with you shortly for the forecast for the rest of the country. See you in a bit. The 4th of July was the first major holiday where life felt almost normal, with most COVID restrictions lifted nationwide. Nearly 2 million people passed through TSA checkpoints every day this weekend, and gatherings on beaches and at parades were back in full swing. But the health officials in the White House aren't letting their guard down. 67% of U.S. adults have received at least one dose. That's short of the president's goal of 70%. The rapidly spreading Delta variant is renewing efforts to get more shots in arms to avoid a major surge in cases. NBC News Now correspondent Dasha Burns is following the latest COVID headlines this morning. Dasha, good morning. So we've, of course, talked quite a bit about outreach and programs to get people who've been on the fence about the vaccine to go ahead and get the shot, like bringing the shot to places where they're going to be anyway, commuter hubs, things like that. So tell us about this latest push to vaccinate more Americans.
Hey, Savannah, good morning. Yeah, as you mentioned, a lot of celebration over the weekend. And even though the White House fell short of their goal of 70% by the 4th of July, President Biden still striking a pretty optimistic tone over the weekend, but also saying that getting vaccinated is the most patriotic thing that Americans could do. And Savannah, while so many folks celebrated, breathed a sigh of relief that we're rounding the bend here with the pandemic, there are still many parts of this country where the vaccination rate is lagging. looking at states like Mississippi, where the amount of people with one dose is just 36%. Louisiana, where that number is 39%. States like Idaho, Wyoming, Alabama, 40% of people with at least one dose. And those are the areas where those low vaccination rates are making those communities more vulnerable to the Delta variant, which is spreading, especially among that unvaccinated population, Savannah.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, Dasha, I have one to ask you about that's concerning. It's sad. The CDC is now investigating the death of a 13-year-old Michigan boy who died days after getting his second dose of the Pfizer vaccine. What are you learning about that investigation and what might have happened here?
Hey, Savannah. Yeah, 13-year-old Jacob Kleinick died in his sleep 3 days after receiving his second dose of the Pfizer vaccine. His aunt telling the Detroit Free Press that he was healthy with no underlying conditions. And the county health department in Saginaw County, where Jacob was from, telling local press, confirming the CDC is investigating whether there is a correlation between his death and the vaccine. And that is the important thing to note here, Savannah. There are still a lot of questions. There is not yet a confirmed connection between his death and the vaccine. And examiners say that it could still be months before this investigation is complete.
Absolutely important context there. Dasha, also, let's stay on Pfizer. Researchers in Israel say the vaccine is less effective against the Delta variant. How much protection do people have? What's Pfizer saying about this? And if you got this shot, is there anything you need to know?
Yeah, Israel's health ministry saying that Pfizer is less effective against the Delta variant than previous strains, according to a preliminary study. The data shows full inoculation is 64% effective at preventing infection. That's compared to 94% with previous strains. But here's the key piece here. Again, it is still highly effective against preventing hospitalization, showing a 93% effectiveness rate at preventing hospitalization, Savannah.
And that is something so important to keep in mind and to keep you safe. Dasha, thank you so much. The United Kingdom has had one of the longest lockdowns in the world, but now we're seeing plans that would scrap virtually all remaining COVID-19 restrictions. No more social distancing, no mask mandate, and all in just under 2 weeks' time. Announcing the change, Prime Minister Boris Johnson said it was time for government to step back.
We must be honest with ourselves that if we can't reopen our society in the next few weeks, when we will be helped by the arrival of summer and by the school holidays, then we must ask ourselves, when will we be able to return to normal? We'll move away from legal restrictions and allow people to make their own informed decisions about how to manage the virus.
NBC News correspondent Ali Arouzi joins us now from London. Ali, good morning. So a big step for the UK if these measures are approved. Tell us more about the government's plans and why now? Why is this the time after they've had such a long lockdown?
Good morning, Savannah. That's right. It's the final decision will be made next week on the last phase of a very ambitious roadmap to lift all restrictions on COVID-19, pretty much all restrictions. Look, the country, as you mentioned, has been under very draconian measures for a year and a half almost now. And now they're going to the total opposite and opening up the country almost completely. There'll be no limit on social contact. Groups of any number of people can gather indoors or outdoors together. There'll be no more social distancing. You don't have to keep 6 feet apart from anyone other than very specific places like the airport. All businesses will now be allowed to open, including nightclubs. There'll be no capacities at large events like sporting venues. So it's a big open up.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we've seen, though, cases are rising in the UK due to the Delta variant, much like they are here in the US. Do you think that could mean the government will reimpose some rules if things get worse as they open up?
Well, look, Savannah, Boris Johnson is taking the country into uncharted territory. Nobody else has lifted these sort of restrictions anywhere else in the world, especially as the highly contagious Delta variant is so prevalent. So he's taking a big gamble and he's betting on the UK's rapid vaccine rollout program to offer broad protection to a lot of people. And it's been very effective. 86% of adults have received 1 shot. 64% of adults have received 2 shots. So he's betting on that to offer a lot of protection and not put a lot of strain on the NHS system. But if it doesn't work, he said that he would reluctantly have to reintroduce measures, something he doesn't want to do. And if he does have to do that, it'll probably show that he jumped the gun by removing all of these restrictions, and it will be an embarrassing U-turn for him. Already the leader of the Labour opposition party has said that the moves Boris Johnson is making are reckless, but only time will tell whether he's made the right decision or not. He's also betting on the summer months to afford a bit of cushioning because the schools will be closed and people will gather outdoors more than indoors.
All right. Ali, thank you so much. Let's now get a check on your morning news now weather around the rest of the country. Bill Cairns is back as promised. Hey there.
Hey, so let's talk about what's going to happen with Elsa after Florida, because it's going to have a lot of impacts going up the coast. So as we go through the landfall, that's going to be sometime either late Tuesday into early Wednesday morning. And then as we go throughout Wednesday, the storm will move up through Georgia. And then by the time we get to Thursday morning, it's heading up through the Carolinas. By Thursday afternoon and evening, some of that's through the mid-Atlantic region. And again, it's not going to be such winds, but there will be some periods of very heavy rain. Obviously, with any landfalling tropical system, you worry about flooding. But Florida has sandy soil, so I don't think it's going to be too bad. But then that rainfall will be heavy up through the Carolinas, into North Carolina. And then there's a lot of moisture that's going to be available with thunderstorms and Elsa, a combination of the two separate systems combining for a heavy rain event into the Northeast. So for today, we are concerned with the chance of tornadoes in areas of central Florida and in Southwest Florida during the day today. If we're going to get a lot of damage from this storm, it would likely be from any tornadoes that spawn. Hopefully they won't, but that's a possibility. And then also in the Northeast today, we're expecting some strong storms. 36 million people at risk, including the New York City area, Hartford, Boston, Providence, Albany, New York, to Binghamton, Scranton. Damaging wind definitely with the strongest storms, but maybe even a chance of an isolated tornado. And it's also very hot and humid throughout the I-95 corridor. 29 million people under heat advisories from Boston to New York to Philly to Baltimore. It's kind of a 2-day heat wave, and then the rainfall from Elsa will cool everyone off. So the forecast for today, obviously the tropical storm's going to get all the attention and its effects in areas of the west coast of Florida. But I don't want to forget about our friends in the west, Savannah. It's 104 today in Boise. We are going to see another pretty epic heat wave towards the end of this week in the west. Once Elsa's done, we're going to talk more about this, another significant heat wave for the West Coast, the least thing that they want to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. Oof. All right, Bill, thank you so much. See you next hour.
Yeah.
Coming up, an update on Pope Francis, his condition this morning after undergoing colon surgery, and how long he may remain hospitalized. Up next. Pope Francis is continuing his recovery after undergoing intestinal surgery on Sunday. The Vatican said the 84-year-old is making good progress in the hospital, where he's due to remain for the next week. NBC News foreign correspondent Claudio Lavanga joins us now from Rome. Claudio, good morning. So the Vatican released a new statement this morning. What'd they say?
That's right, Savannah. Well, they released a statement about an hour ago. They said that the Pope rested well overnight, and when he woke up, he had a little breakfast. He read some newspapers and even got up from bed and took a little walk. They also said that the post-surgery progress is regular and that the exams and that the routine exams and checks are giving good results. These are, of course, the good news that many Catholics around the world have been waiting for since that surprise announcement on Sunday that he was going to go to the hospital right after his Sunday prayer here at St. Peter's Square, right behind me for that major operation. Now, the only question remains that remains unanswered is when will we see him back here at the Vatican? Well, the Vatican says that it will have to stay in the hospital for at least 7 days. That means until Saturday or Sunday, so he may be back here right on time for his next major engagement, which is the next Sunday prayer in St. Peter's Square, Savannah.
All right, Claudio, we know you'll stay on this for us. Thank you so much. Claudio Lavanga reporting from Vatican City. Let's now look at what else is making news around the world this morning. And NBC News reporter Matt Bodner is with us from Moscow. Good morning, Matt.
Savannah, good morning. Well, let's start things off here in Russia, where a passenger plane crashed this morning in the Far East. Now, we still don't know what happened, but we are talking about a 40-year-old Soviet military transport. It was converted for civilian use, and its safety certificates were actually set to expire next month. Now, this plane was due for a check-in on landing. It missed that, and it was declared missing. Searchers have found the wreckage. No survivors have been reported. Moving on over now to Australia, where the 2021 Grand Prix in Melbourne has actually been cancelled for the second year in a row due to COVID-19, and specifically the slow vaccine rollout, specifically in the state of Victoria, but also federal regulations in Australia that limit the amount of foreigners who can come in. So the organizers kind of decided this was a bit untenable still. And then we'll finish up in Norway, where a new law is coming into effect that will force social media influencers to very clearly identify any alterations they've done to their photos. I think specifically to paid posts on social media on any platform. And this is really just kind of intended to try to combat self-esteem issues that arise, from unrealistic body image standards that you see on some of these social media influencer channels. Savannah?
Absolutely, and something that so seriously impacts all the young people who follow those influencers. So that's actually really interesting to hear. Matt, thank you so much. Coming up, a consumer alert this morning surrounding those tiny button batteries, the potentially life-saving trick every parent should know to keep their child safe. Up next. Gwen Stefani and Blake Shelton are officially married. The happy couple tied the knot in Oklahoma on Saturday over the 4th of July weekend. The ceremony was officiated by voice host and our own Today Show co-host Carson Daly. The two got engaged back in October of 2020, and they've been dating since 2015. The couple first met on the set of NBC's The Voice when Stefani became a judge. They've collaborated on songs many times, including Go Ahead and Break My Heart and You Make It Feel Like Christmas, one of my favorites. And we also have some baby news this morning. The newest addition to the NBC News family, correspondent Blaine Alexander, you know her, and her husband Jay Bailey, announced they are proud parents to their first child, a girl named Sage Milan. Blaine told the Today Show the name Sage embodies traits like wisdom and a calming spirit, and Milan is a combination of Sage's grandmother's names, Millie and Anita. So adorable. Congratulations, Blaine. We miss you. Enjoy your beautiful baby girl. Now, more than 3,000 kids accidentally ingest button batteries every year. Since the COVID pandemic began, though, that number has gone up 93%. NBC News correspondent Katie Beck spoke to one mother who's raising awareness about battery safety after suffering a devastating tragedy.
Like most 16-month-olds, Reese was a ball of energy.
She was a spitfire. She made her presence known from the second that she could.
Tragically, in October of 2020, she got a hold of a small button battery from inside a remote control. Her mother, Trista, realized Reese had swallowed it when she noticed the battery missing, and Reese began wheezing. The tiny toddler would undergo several procedures to repair the hole the battery had burned in her esophagus.
It was a lot of battling sedation. It was a lot of waiting for inflammation to go down. It was a lot of praying.
Her fight to survive ended in December.
I never knew of the dangers of button batteries.
They're found in household items like thermometers, calculators, remote controls, watches, even kids' toys and shoes. And in the first 7 months of the pandemic, ER visits related to button batteries rose 93% among young children. If a button battery is ingested, seek medical help immediately. Experts recommend giving honey to children on the way to the ER, 2 teaspoons every 10 minutes for children over a year old, according to Poison Control.
Honey helps to reduce the rate of injury the battery causes once it's lodged in a child's esophagus, creating a physical barrier between the tissue and the battery.
Trista's nonprofit Reese's Purpose now lobbying lawmakers for better safety standards, mandating screws for all products that use button batteries.
I would still have Reese. I'd be picking her up from school right now, and my family was robbed of those moments.
Now living a mission to honor Reese by preventing another family's pain. Katie Beck, NBC News.
You've probably heard a lot about Bitcoin, arguably the most popular of the many different cryptocurrencies. Now, even though it lives on the web, it's having some serious real-world consequences, using more energy than entire countries. NBC News correspondent Josh Letterman joins us now. Josh, this is so fascinating to me. We always hear this term Bitcoin mining, which is a little confusing since we know it's just something online. So tell us what's going on here.
Well, it's very confusing, Savannah. In fact, very few people actually understand exactly how Bitcoin mining works. I'll count myself among that list. And even fewer people understand the full extent of the energy use that Bitcoin mining actually requires. To get a better handle of it as part of our investigation, I got exclusive access inside one of the largest cryptocurrency mines in the country, and the first with its own power plant. Take a look. On the shores of Seneca Lake, a retired power plant has reawakened, now pumping out 500 million pounds of CO2 a year. Not because this community needs electricity. Its main purpose? Powering thousands of computers 24/7, mining Bitcoin, a virtual currency creating real-world risks.
Burn more fossil fuels in the middle of climate change to make fake money? It's ludicrous.
We were shown this server room where you need ear protection to shield the deafening roar.
The Greenwich power plant shut down permanently in 2011 because there just wasn't the demand. But Bitcoin mining has given it new life. Now companies across the country are looking at doing the same thing.
A private equity firm bought the dormant coal plant in 2014, converting it to natural gas, installing nearly 10,000 computers, and growing. Bitcoin is all digital. There's no bank, no government printing money. Instead, high-powered computers solve complex puzzles to verify Bitcoin transactions. When they do, they also earn Bitcoins. That's called Bitcoin mining, and it devours huge amounts of electricity, more than entire countries like Argentina and Sweden.
We do not need to pollute this lake for Bitcoins. We don't all need Bitcoin.
An intake pipe 2 football fields long cools the 70-year-old turbines with about 100 million gallons of water a day drawn from the lake. The superheated water is discharged into a river, raising fears about the fragile trout and harmful algae blooms. But CEO Jeff Kurtz says Greenwich is carbon neutral because it buys credits to offset its emissions.
The plant's been operating for 80 years, and the environmental impact of the plant has never been better.
Kurt told us the plant does provide some power to the grid for local homes and businesses. But Greenwich has big plans to ramp up, to mine 26 times as much Bitcoin, taking over other old power plants.
Why should all of this power be going into essentially making money from mining Bitcoin?
Well, we think Bitcoin is here to stay, and we really see Greenwich as a model for what the rest of the industry can do.
Greenwich tells investors it costs less than $3,000 to mine each Bitcoin. They sell now for close to $33,000. A big environmental cost with a huge financial reward.
And in just the latest example of how this is expanding across the country, Savannah, just this weekend, Greenwich announcing plans to create an entire new Bitcoin mine in Spartansburg, South Carolina. Savannah.
Wow. Okay, Josh, fascinating piece. I love that woman who told you that it's just like making fake money in the middle of climate change and using the word ludicrous. I mean, I'm going to ask you a question that I don't even fully understand what I'm asking, so walk me through this here. I mean, we're hearing that China has cracked down on Bitcoin mining, okay? And then that, though, is making it easier and more profitable to mine here in the States. So explain how this works, especially if it's this digital thing you mentioned in your piece. It's not like a government printing money. Why would one country cracking down make it more available? And what does that mean we should be doing here?
Well, basically, the more miners that are mining at the same time worldwide, the less money that you're going to get for each Bitcoin, and the easier it's going to be to actually mine it. So we've heard these companies cite national security as a reason that it's important to have Bitcoin here, saying China has been dominating this space, and if Bitcoin's here to stay, we got to have some of it here in the U.S. Now we see China saying this is far too much electricity. It's overtaxing our system. We're going to crack down. And so a lot of that is coming to the U.S. Now, if that Bitcoin mined in the U.S. comes from renewable energy sources powering those computers, like solar and wind, that's one thing. But if it's going to come from fossil fuels, that's going to be a real problem for climate change.
Oh, my gosh. And you hear about that superheated water going right back into a river. I mean, it does definitely raise eyebrows. Josh, fascinating piece. Thank you so much.
You got it.
Coming up, the 4th of July hacking spree that you might not have heard about. We'll tell you about the latest international ransomware heist and the damage it's now causing up next. Hackers targeted a U.S. information technology firm over the 4th of July weekend in one of the biggest cyber attacks in history. Up to 1,500 businesses could have been affected, and the group responsible is demanding $70 million in ransom. NBC News reporter Kevin Collier joins us now for more. Kevin, good morning. So what do we know about this group, and is their goal just making money? And do we know anything about the ransom being paid?
Hey, morning. This is one of the most prolific and longest running of the many Russian-affiliated ransomware gangs that have just been relentlessly targeting American businesses for more than a year now. And they're at the center of an incredibly thorny geopolitical problem, but really we've never seen any evidence that they're motivated by anything other than money. It's organized crime by any meaningful definition. It just happens to be done with computers, and they've gotten quite good at it. We believe that some places have paid the ransom, but they've hit so many different targets that there's no comprehensive look at any of the payments.
Yeah. And I mean, Kevin, I hate to put it this way, but it feels like we're getting used to hearing about these type of attacks by now. What makes this particular one so unprecedented?
So usually these guys, other ransomware gangs, will spend a little bit of time targeting a single organization, like a hospital chain or a school or a business, and they'll hack it and they'll encrypt its computers, they'll steal the files, and they'll demand a ransom. But this one was different and much more sophisticated because it's kind of like they went for a supply chain attack, and it exploits how interconnected the internet makes us. So the hackers somehow, we don't have any idea how, they obtained an unpublished vulnerability for an IT services company called Kaseya. Now, the corporate world is very heavily tied up in companies that do this or that for other companies. So Kaseya makes software for other companies that in turn help other businesses go online. So the hackers weren't just able to infect Kaseya's computers, but Kaseya's customers.
Right. Wow. Now, President Biden says he's devoting all available resources to investigate this attack. Do we know what this investigation will look like? And also, has he contacted President Putin at all, since we know this group is Russia connected? And we know that was a big thing that came up at the Biden-Putin summit that we just saw a couple weeks ago, the fact that this country harbors these types of cyber criminals.
Yeah, he said Sunday that he had not called Putin about this, and the Kremlin said yesterday that they had not heard from the U.S. about this. But whatever happens, this is a ridiculously hard problem. The only easy solution would be if Russia started arresting its own cyber criminals that attack the U.S. and other international targets. Right. And Russia simply has not shown any indication that it wants to start doing that. You know, the U.S. has to play catch up in defense in terms of remediating this attack and stop it from happening again, and in offense. And we're really far behind in both.
All right, Kevin, fascinating and really quite disturbing. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
It is time for our CNBC Money Minute, the other big financial headlines of the day and why they matter to you. CNBC's Contessa Brewer is with me today. Hey, Contessa, good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, oil prices now hitting their highest level since 2018 after OPEC and its partners, including Russia, abandoned talks over adding more crude to the market. The group had agreed Friday to add about 400,000 barrels each month from August through December, and then extended the pact through next year. But the United Arab Emirates rejected that proposal in a dispute with Saudi Arabia over production quotas. Last year, OPEC made record output cuts to cope with the crash in oil prices resulting from the pandemic. Volkswagen has hit the brakes on Bugatti. It is selling the supercar brand as the auto industry shifts to electric vehicles. VW owned Bugatti for 2 decades. It's one of the most recognizable names in the world of super luxury cars. Bugatti's flagship vehicle, the Chiron, sells for about 3 million buckaroos. It is the fastest street legal car at a top speed of 304 miles an hour. But these powerful combustion engines are now out of step, and Volkswagen recently said it would phase out gas-powered vehicles over the next few decades. Chinese automaker BYD saw sales of its electric vehicles nearly triple last month. But the company, which is backed by billionaire Warren Buffett, sold fewer passenger cars in the first half of the year during the same period in 2019, before the pandemic. BYD is still ahead of its startup rivals in terms of sales, but it trails well behind the global market leader Tesla, which sold 200,000 vehicles in the second quarter alone. Time for some water.
Yeah, I was going to say, thank you. All the headlines we needed. Take a break, get some water. Thank you so much. We'll see you in a bit. Coming up, death threats, harassment, and even an arrest. How one county in Northern Virginia is reacting to recent discussions about critical race theory. Up next. Critical race theory is being debated in school board meetings across the country. In Northern Virginia, the debate went from intense to chaotic. NBC News Now correspondent Priscilla Thompson spoke to one mother about the threats she receives for just bringing it up for discussion.
Well, Savannah, the Loudoun County School District began implementing changes in 2020 after an investigation found that the district's policies harmed Black and Latino students. The district implemented new diversity training for staff, revised policies for responding to racial slurs and hate speech, among other things. Now, some say those changes are being misinterpreted as critical race theory.
I actually attended my first PTA meeting in this very room.
In the last 19 years, Brenda Sheraton has gone from concerned parent to school board chairwoman in Loudoun County, Virginia. But she says what began as a dream job has turned into a nightmare.
Don't teach our kids guilt for their failings.
Over the past several weeks, Sheraton says she has received nearly a dozen letters at her home, hundreds of emails daily, and voicemails like these.
You are a disgusting piece of Miss Sheridan. You know your home address is on the internet, don't you? That could be a little scary. Stupid, fat lover.
Anger born out of controversy around transgender rights and critical race theory, the decades-old academic study of racism and inequality.
Does the Loudoun County School District teach critical race theory?
It does not.
Are you all considering teaching critical race theory?
We are not. It would be inappropriate because it is theory based in master level and doctoral level education.
In recent months, Loudoun County has become the latest hotspot in the battle over the contentious subject matter. The school district, which was among the last in the country to desegregate, has gone from being predominantly white to majority minority over the last decade. Last fall, they began implementing changes after an internal audit and subsequent state investigation found that their policies harmed Black and Latino students and called on the district to fix the discriminatory disparate impact identified to ensure equal opportunity for each student. The district implemented new diversity training for staff, banned the Confederate flag on clothing, and revised policies for responding to racial slurs and hate speech.
We have an equity initiative. We are talking about our students' experiences. We are focusing on making our marginalized students feel welcome and affirmed, all of them.
Still, many parents in the Northern Virginia county are now rallying against what they say is critical race theory. A Facebook group created by community members to combat what they view as misinformation about the district's equity and diversity push only made matters worse.
The Facebook group called Anti-Racist Parents of Loudoun County is accused of targeting parents who are anti-CRT.
Last month, things took a turn.
I am disgusted by your bigotry.
A school board meeting where new state-mandated policies for transgender students was being discussed descended into chaos, resulting in one arrest.
This is an unlawful arrest. I have a First Amendment right.
I have never been afraid to be in my community. I have never thought twice about going anywhere in Loudoun or anywhere in my community. And I stop and think twice now.
Across the country, similar stories are emerging amid anger over mask wearing, critical race theory, transgender rights, and more. But in a state like Virginia, a former Republican stronghold now solidly blue, Sheraton worries some concerned parents are being used as pawns.
I believe this started with parents who are angry, frustrated, full of anxiety, wanting to do what was best for their students, and it has snowballed to something that I'm not even sure they understand. The flashpoints, some of them are weekly, and something dies down, so somebody lights another fire.
Who's igniting these fires?
I think it is politically motivated. When Virginia was purple, it was very important in national elections. And so when Virginia really tipped blue, it started to affect that as well. When you change the dynamic in Northern Virginia, you change the dynamic in the state. Governor's race.
As Sheraton continues to bear the brunt of the harassment in Loudoun, she says she won't back down, even as she faces a recall effort.
The work we're doing is important. It is worth every email I have to read and every phone call I get. It is worth it.
A new survey obtained by NBC News shows teachers nationwide say schools aren't pushing them to teach critical race theory. Still, district leaders across the country are facing harassment and even threats over the issue. Savannah?
All right, Priscilla Thompson, thank you so much. And that does it for this hour of Morning News Now, but the news continues right now.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.